Shawna Henderson of Be Free Homes. Now, she's worked with CMHC and many other places, and she's a researcher, but she's also designs co-housing, and she's the designer for the Bridgewater co-housing and many, many other projects. So please welcome Shawna Henderson.
Thanks, David. So my job, I feel today, is to do the limbo. It's a big one, right? Is to inspire you to want to stay and talk more, because you've been listening to a lot of people talk. So my presentations are usually, there's very few words in them. I use a lot of words in my day job. I talk a lot, so I'll keep it as close to getting us back on track in terms of time. But I like, in my world, to use analogies a lot, because we all think in terms of simple things that we see on a day-to-day basis. So a patchwork quilt has pieces, layers, and threads. And so what I'm going to talk to today about, I can hear this doing that weird, awful noise. Is that better? Okay. So I'm going to talk about pieces, layers, and threads, and how we work those in community and build sustainable housing. So this is me. I've been in the business of energy efficient, sustainable housing since 1990. I spent basically most of my adult life doing this. I had an epiphany at the age of 26 and went, oh, that's what matters, is making practical sculpture for people to live in. So my focus is in deep energy retrofits, net zero new construction. I grew up with a cousin who was in a wheelchair, and his saying to us was, "You're only able-bodied for now." So when I started doing design work, I really got into this whole thing of universal design. It's like, because Fred was always like, well, can I come to your house? Can I get there? I watched him go through indignity after indignity, getting, at school, having to be lifted off his, out from in between the toilet and the stall, the wall, things like that. It's like, nobody deserves anything other than a good life. Excuse me. And before I get off on that rant too far, I'm going to say that barrier-free layouts, user-friendly designs, and aging in place are also intrinsic into everything that I work in terms of design and also in terms of consulting. So I've done a lot of work on net zero energy. I first cut my teeth in off-grid houses and did a research project for CMHC on the huge disconnect between what people thought of in terms of their energy use in an off-grid house, their electrical use. They were amazing budgeters. But a house on Lasqueti Island in Vancouver, in BC, similar climate to Vancouver, 9 cords of wood a year to heat the house. Like, that's crazy. I was like, I live in an old house in Nova Scotia and I use 5. Like, what are you doing? So anyway, so that was so I'm just giving you a bit of background on what I've been doing and where I come from. So I looked at how do we get to net zero in existing houses, and then I worked with natural resources to actually do a whole bunch of energy modeling and focus groups with builders on how to get to net zero. And here's just a little collage of some of the houses that I have been involved with designing. 3 of them, these ones are in St. Margaret's Bay. I stay fairly close to home. But they're all very, very different. The middle one is a load-bearing straw bale house. The top left one is a flex house, so that was able, we could move that design from a single bedroom to a 3-bedroom house, or split it into 2 suites. The one on the top left, no, sorry, top right, is a studio that had was built on an existing, on a it's like what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, just lost my brain. It's just, oh, there's a word. Like an auxiliary house or auxiliary suite on an existing lot. That house, the top right one, was a studio that could be renovated into a 3-bedroom house on the same lot. So we actually planned it so that it could be flexible. The one on the bottom left is an old Acadian timber frame house that we repurposed into a house, a full-size house. And the one on the bottom right is a net zero house. So I'm not going to use a lot of words on the screen. I'll be putting up lots of images, so I won't be looking at you very much because I cue off of those. But what I want you to do is think about the big picture. So where are we in the world, in Canada, in Nova Scotia, in the Bay? So, you know, this is kind of cataclysmic, right? We're here. High global risk. This guy, what, who, me, what? You know, I love this picture because it's so non-GQ. But I'm a business person. I don't think this is a really super good idea to buy something that's already broken and that you have to fix. You know, and then we have another guy's like, and you know, and now we're burning tires. So these are, you know, these are risks. There are risks that are real. They're out there. There are things that we can actually deal with and we cannot deal with. And, you know, politics is a fairly risky business to get into, and the risk translates out to all of us. So we have fires, we have drought. No, sorry. Floods, we have drought. And so what we need to talk about and what we need to think about in all of the things that we're talking about in terms of community and housing is future proofing. Will it be hotter or colder here? Will it be wetter or drier? Will there be access to the grid or not? And one thing I didn't put up here is, will there be access past the isthmus at Tentramar Marshes or not? So we have risks that we know we need to deal with. So, and here's where the quilts come in. It's all stitched together, right? None of those things can be separated from the other one in any significant way. You can talk about one thing at a time, but if you don't consider all of them at the same time or within reason, you know, context, then you are in trouble. So here we are, Risk Assessment 101. Who is defining the risk and who is at risk? So this is, you know, Venn diagrams are my favorite thing. They are very, very simple, right? You have this on one side, you have this on the other side. Sometimes you have 3 or 4 circles, but the middle part is the juicy thing, right? The risk of disaster is where those 2 circles overlap. So we need to be able to understand those things. And then we look at excuse me, the matrix of risk assessment. And you don't have to know, you don't have to sort of dive into this. Just know that anything that's red is a disaster. Everything that's green, you're okay with. So we want to stay in the green because that gives us security. Security of shelter, food, energy, people, and the planet. So I'm going to drop it down now to our level. So this is the plan for the proposal development at the head of the bay. And I'm not taking sides on this at all. I just want to point out the key things about what needs to be talked about. What are the risks? We know that there are risks associated with this because we have done lots. The Stewardship Association has done a ton of work around that in terms of what do people care about, what means quality of life in the Bay. What is it? Number one is water. Water supply, water treatment. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Water. Oh, not with the electronics. Density, that's a big one. Affordability, that's another big one. And character. Does this development suit the area? And who cares? Well, apparently a lot of people do. So the developer and HRM and anybody else who's involved in actually moving this forward need to listen to the people who live here. So that's the end of my presentation. So we've already shown that we have local leadership because you're here now. And so now we're going to talk about the quilts. 5 minutes, oh my God. Okay, security blankets. Oh, we need security blankets. And, they're beautiful. We want to create security. Okay, what's going on here? And people make quilts for different reasons. This is from the 14th century. It's pretty, and it was used for keeping people warm. This is also a quilt. It's armor. This is also a quilt. This is bedding. 15 more. Okay. 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 I can slow down so you can understand me then. So quilts are made of necessity and love, and those two things actually make art that is useful, warm, and very valuable. And they're made by hand, or they have been traditionally made by hand. And traditionally they have been made by women. Traditionally they have been made by communities of women of all sorts and shapes and sizes and flavors. This one shows they're sitting on the quilt. These are their descendants making a quilt. This is from Alabama, from Gee's Bend. Excuse me. So the women's work that you've seen in those slides is beneficial to everybody. It keeps you warm. There are very practical reasons for pretty much all of the work that women do that has been translated into folk craft or art. But not everybody who makes quilts is a woman. These folks were taking part in the AIDS quilt project, which ended up being huge. These are all quilts that were made for people who died from AIDS. Each quilt piece is 3 feet by 6 feet, the size of a grave. And it started in 1985. This picture was taken in 2012. There was a 19th annual conference on AIDS. And now there are 54 tons of quilts. There are still people making quilts for those who have died from AIDS. This one is called the Quilt of Belonging. It's 120 feet long. There are 365 quilt pieces. Excuse me, I am coughing, sorry. Each quilt piece was made by a specific community. And I pulled out 3 that I really thought would be of significance here. The first one in the middle is the Mi'kmaq quilt piece. The 2 on the sides represent West Coast Native First Nations people that I've been affected by in my life. The one on the left is the Gitsan Wet'suwet'en. The one on the right is the Tuchonnoth. So we're looking at things that are personal and communal and political. And the quilting, is the stitching that holds it all together. So all the layers, personal, communal, and political, are all held together with the quilting. So there are threads that run through all of these things that we can bind together. Sorry. And what do you use? Some pretty basic things. I think actually I have, yeah, thank you. I have asthma, and I think that's actually what's causing it is I'm just a little heavy, but thank you. So apologies for the wheezing and the coughing. So really basic, fundamental, simple equipment. I mean, you can use lots more fancy equipment, but this is all you really need. So take that in terms of where are we and what are we doing? All you need is a group of people sitting in the same room with some kind of shared vision or desire to make something happen. And you take a bunch of pieces, the things that you've got. So the this and the that, a thread and the needle, and you work with what you've got. You organize it into patterns. So you need some inspirations. You build it into pieces. So the pieces get built into blocks, which get built into your top layer. And then you have 3 layers, the top, the batting, and the backing. So in terms of what we're talking about in housing and community, the top can be the idea of the design and the vision that we have. The middle is how we get there, and the backing is all the stuff that undermines that. I hope it doesn't undermine it. That is the fundamental things that we need to actually have happen. So things need to be built to code. We need to deal with regulations. There are financial issues involved. Those things back it all up. So there's the 3 layers. Onions have layers. Parfait has layers. You see where I'm going, right? What else has layers? Ogres. for all those who have seen Shrek, well, actually, houses have layers. They look a lot like this. You have a top and a middle and a bottom of a house, so roof, walls, and foundation. Within that, you have assemblies that break out a different way, so that everything is looking at how you are protecting yourself from the world outside in terms of weather, sound, bugs, pestilence, your neighbors, whatever it is, and snow. So let's start off with what your materials are. What shape are they in? What are your layers looking like? So what's your starting point? And what do you want to end up with? Now, I obviously showed some pretty extreme versions of, housing that's in rough shape. But so let's talk about the design layer. This is an absolutely stunning quilt that is made from really super high quality or high-end silks and velvets, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's a crazy quilt. It's a high-end custom design. Whoops, sorry, I'm going too fast. This quilt is a ready-made quilt. It was made on a machine. It's ready-made. You can buy it off the shelf and enjoy it. So you're taking advantage of someone else's capacity to be creative and build something that you possibly couldn't or don't want to. And then this is the crazy quilt. This is built out of everything that was possibly available. And crazy quilts work because there's still a plan. You're still making something that is going to have a shape. And how it pans out is up to you. So that's sort of like the owner-builder kind of person. So we have, this high-end luxury housing that we don't actually see very many of historically in this area, but they pop up. I don't have any pictures of people's houses here because I don't want to, I don't want to, well, I don't. So, oh, goodness. So houses come in large. There's a lot of newer houses here that are much bigger than what we're used to. These are small houses. This is a house I designed up in Sheet Harbor. It's an off-grid house. They come in medium. And that's pretty typical of what we see in the Bay Area here. And then there are small houses. This one is the studio that I designed. And they come in size small, and they're far more indicative of early settler construction. A lot of the older houses around here are quite small, and people are, renovate them into cottages and stuff like that, or add on to them and add on to them and add on to them. Oh, sorry, I did have some more notes on there. And so when you're building a new house that's small, you need to optimize the floor plans because you don't have as much space to play with. You can't say, oh, I want a big living room and it's going to be like this and I'm going to have all of these various functions in it, but I'm going to have an open space that's going to be living room, dining room, and kitchen, and it's going to be as big as the living room of the house next door. So now you need to really think about how you're putting it together. And just because it's small doesn't mean that it's less expensive. You still have big costs involved with foundations. You still have big costs involved with roofing. You can shift some of the stuff, but most of the costs are. If you drop the size of the house, you're not dropping the cost of the house proportionally. And then there are tiny, tiny houses. Anybody seen this one? Houses in size tiny. These are really hard to make accessible. This is for an able-bodied person for the most part. There are some legal challenges, as we heard, to living in a tiny house, especially one on wheels. And they're very easy to outgrow. There are a lot of people who were in the vanguard of the movement who have now moved on to a small house because they have kids, or they married, or it was just too small. So it is an option, and I'm not dissing it, but it is an option. But it has, the smaller you get, the fewer options you have in terms of how many people you can physically stick in there. So Lake City Works, we've seen it outside, and I didn't know they were going to be here when I piled this together, but buy tickets. So this is my giant part of my bailiwick, is the energy layer. It's like, what did I do? So energy security is imperative for all sorts of things, for global, the climate change issues, but also for your affordability. If you cannot control your energy sources, if your supply cannot be affordable or competitive, that it gets interrupted, that it's not available, those are problems that affect us all. So energy security is a number one issue for me. So the big issue that I work with in houses is, how do we make it so you actually don't need to have very much energy at all? Because here's why. These are all graphs that show the increase in prices of various fuels and electricity over a period of 30 to 20 years. It doesn't matter where they're from. They're all from different places, but like this one's from Australia, the other one was from Quebec, this one's from Ontario. See a pattern? So energy reduction is a keystone to affordability. If you're in an existing house, you need to figure out ways that you can drop your energy use. If you're in a new house, you need to build out, and you do that by, I'm jumping ahead. If you make your house affordable because you don't need to have a lot of energy, then you have the similar kind of budget line item as you have with your mortgage payment or your property taxes. You know what it is, as opposed to, for instance, I live in an electrically heated house. So in the summer, my bills with 2 teenagers in it, with lots of hot showers, are about $350 every 2 months. In the winter, because we are all electric, that bumps up to, in the worst part of the year, $1,500 in every 2 months. So I confess, this is like totally shoemaker's kids, right? But that, you can go on a budget plan, but still, it's incredibly high. So the idea that you could actually focus on a design or a strategy that drops your energy use so that you don't have to worry about that is hugely important in terms of how are you going to stay where you want to be, or how are you going to get into a house or housing that you want, and then how do you stay there. And we're back to this. Use less energy. And the bonus parts of those that if you use less energy, you're in a house that's more comfortable. It's healthier for you because it's been correctly designed and the mechanical systems work for you, and you spend less money. So here's a nice little graph that shows what we've done with some deep energy retrofits. So we take the initial utility bill, and this is in Bridgewater as well with the Clean Net Zero program. This is what we are doing. We are dropping the utility bill as far as we possibly can. That costs money, right? So financing costs are there. And then the top part, this is the ideal. The gravy goes back to you. Right? The top part of the money, that money column that you're not spending on your utility bill or your financing costs, that's money in your pocket. That's the ideal. Getting there is tough. But this is what it looks like in terms of time. You have payments for a while, and then your payments have been paid, that you match those up, and then you have more savings. And we have energy use, drops down like this, and I'm going to rip through this one. This looks like what is the pie shape that a standard issue house for that would meet building code for Nova Scotia would look like. A net zero energy house is a very smaller pie. And I'm sorry about the color. I had to reformat this, and the colors went weird. So on the left, the big chunk is space heating. On the right, the big chunk is appliances. So appliances and lighting are taking up 20% of your cost in the conventional house, but they're taking up 55 or 54% of your energy use in the net zero house. So it's a lot easier to heat, cool, and condition the house, and also to provide your hot water. You need smaller equipment. When you're doing energy efficiency work, these are the things, these things that I've highlighted here, these are the things that actually aren't part of the house. They're the add-on parts that you can easily change. In the industry, we call them low-hanging fruit. And that's a lot of times where utility programs stop. But where the big ticket items are for homeowners in terms of affordability is here. And these are all things that lead to long-term security, higher upfront costs, obviously, than changing out your dryer, refrigerator, freezer, lighting, and putting in different kinds of sensors. But we need to look at the long term. So we know patterns of reduction. We know how to do this. We just need some. So we focus on reducing or improving the building envelope, reducing the energy load, and where there's policy and will, we can actually do this. And I'm sorry, my dog is barking. she's coughing. Me and her, we cough together. And I'm racking through here. So net zero energy, it's equal energy in, energy out. Here's one. It has a, so this is actually built in Nova Scotia. And you could do an old house, retrofit an old house to net zero. But some houses aren't good for that. Dang, I am going to have to. Not every house can get to net zero. I'm sorry, I'm diving through this. When we get down to net zero level, what we want to do is electrify everything. We don't want to get to, we want to be able to use electricity in ways that that we can take advantage of. And so what that means is heat pumps. This is an air source heat pump or a geothermal system. Battery storage on site. We want local energy production and storage. And that leads to microgrids, which are far more manageable than a vertically integrated big grid like we have right now. And you want to be attached to the grid in some way or another. With a microgrid, that's awesome because then you're actually generating the electricity within the microgrid. Because if you're a standalone and off-grid, you're producing energy, you're not necessarily using it all. I actually just need more, I've got some more water, thanks. I just need more oxygen, actually. But if standalone is not as sustainable, it's going to be more costly. You have to buy batteries. So if you use the grid as your storage bank, and we work towards microgrids as opposed to the giant grid, then we can actually share with our neighbors and connect to the grid. We don't strand assets. We actually use them throughout the community. And here's some examples of houses with a little bit of PV. But what about these kind of buildings? Whose big roof is that? How do we get that? So we need some tools and some pieces to put together. And I'm sorry. Basically, we need to find ways to age in place. That means that we actually have a place to age in. So if you have one of these, you need one of those. You need somebody. If you got one of those, winter is coming. You need one of those, or one of those. Universal design, often that's the quilt. There's nothing there. So you put something in there. There are accessibility from the outside, accessibility from the inside, and accessibility in general on for the buildings and maintenance. Ownership. You can rent the rooms. It might look like this. Probably it's going to look a lot like this. So you could share your space. But you've got legal agreements you need to deal with. What about cultural and privacy issues? Not everybody's going to be the same as you. And personality conflicts. What are you going to do about that? This is something that came up this morning. HRM is actually asking for people to find out what they think of auxiliary suites, whether it's a secondary suite in your house or a backyard suite. So please go to the HRM site or Halifax site and find that survey and tell them what you want. It's questions like, do you think it's going to impact privacy? Do you think it's going to impact your property values? Why do you care, really? So definitely go there. So here's an example of a house that I designed. The floor plan is designed as a whole house, so single family upstairs. You'll notice these two lines here. They separate this first bedroom and the main entrance. That's the bottom part. Oh, come on. That is also separated. So the green is common area. This house, the master bedroom, can be changed so that there's an upper suite here, and the master bedroom becomes a studio, and the bottom floor is a lower suite. So that was designed as a new house so you could share it, but there's zoning regulations, there's legal agreements, and there's cultural proximity and sound. Not everybody is going to live like you. You can repurpose buildings. This is we looked at the old ice arena first. There's co-housing. There's clustered housing. Make your houses with others. These are pictures of just lovely places that I don't have to go too far into the details here. Shared accommodation or shared amenities means you can have a smaller house. Money layers, costs and benefits. But we don't make decisions about houses based on rationality. We don't. We don't. I've worked for a long time in this industry. We don't. We make them based on comfort, safety, and peace of mind. Oh, booger. On our personal goals, what do we want? And on our thoughts about community leadership. So you could rent or own. If you own, you've got down payments and ongoing costs. But look at this model. Here we are, Canada. We are mainly homeowners. In Germany, it's only 41%. Time is up. I gotta go. Can I just blast through there? Because I want to go to the end. So we got all sorts of cool things happening in terms of transport. And food. We got food happening here. Okay. Can I do 2 minutes? Okay, so the community layer, right? The community layer is huge. So I want to talk about this in terms of what everybody has to deal with. A day-to-day thing. Everybody has to deal with laundry. Who deals with it? Through the years. And look what we get. Pink appliances and a crown. Or a luscious, big, beautiful laundry room. Well, check out this cost. That's a lot of money for a laundry room. And it doesn't stop the drudgery. And I don't even know that Ivanka ever did her own laundry, but that's okay. This gal, who fixes them? Sorry, I was going to go on a big rant about the gender discrepancy there, but we'll go right past that one. So either you got it in your house, right? You have an in-suite or in-house laundry, or you have the dingiest dungeon, gross, scary place that I would never want to be in to do my laundry, because I don't know if I'm going to get it out alive, and certainly I don't know if my stuff is going to get out clean. So what can we do to change that? How about this? This is a Laundro Cafe in Vancouver. So this is another place in, I think this is in Copenhagen, I may be wrong, but you can eat, read, and wash there. So I want to put this idea out, because this is the visioning part of what we're going to do next. So I'll take this as part of the sort of like, here, push out into these breakout groups and do amazing things. So there's a reading room. What about a covered pool? An indoor pool in the bay. Like this is for me this is ideally what I would like. And this is a natural pool. This doesn't use chlorine. This is cleaned by a plant system. Solar thermal to keep the water warm. PV to give you electricity. Solar aquatics to deal with your gray water. Somebody else to do your laundry, but not necessarily a gal. Which means that we can all go swimming. And afterwards, oh, where did my slide go? Oh, we could go for coffee. I don't know where it went. And after that, oh, it didn't work. We could go pick up the laundry. There you go. And recycle the gray water. And regulatory, you got to have all your squares in a roof. If you don't, you get rejected. So you go back to the drawing board and you get approved, and and who makes the rules and who makes up the information? Blockchain, blah, blah. I know, there's a lot to take in, right? But who's looking after the records? This is a blockchain is something that is basically allows you to have secure records, but there's all the layers, and who knows where home is? It's the people and creatures that live with us, and whatever it is, if it's your needs, it's where you should be. Make it happen. Oh, there's another one. Quills take time. Your home is your home. Is somebody else's home too? There you go. And I'll be here for the rest of the day. I think I'm just going to float around and ask me questions. Okay, you've got time for questions?
5
Okay.
minutes of questions? Statements?
Yeah, any questions?
Quick?
I think I just everybody's like, what was that?
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I have a question.
Oh,
You could repeat it into the microphone. Just, can you comment a little bit on how big a deal it is to take existing houses to net zero?
How big a deal is it to take existing houses to net zero? It depends. It depends on the condition of the house as it is, if there's any been additions to it or improvements, and it depends on how much money you can throw at it. So, but my thing is that we do it in phases. You would never try it, if you did it all at once, it's going to be 70,000 to whatever. But you could do it in phases over several years as you can afford to.
There's time for me. My name is Hannah Wood, and I have a company doing accessibility consulting, and I don't generally work with private homes, but have you seen an increased need for universal design from builds for homes, or mostly just retrofitting for aging in place has been the norm?
Since 1996, every house that I've designed has been barrier-free. And so I do some consulting with people. There are some builders who will have like a barrier-free main floor or have stuff roughed in for that, but it's not something that is a regular thing, and it makes me kind of crazy.
Yeah,
But
I feel it. Thank you.
One of the things about barrier-free, it's not just good for the disabled, it's good for everybody.
Right, exactly. And this is the thing when I was, it's not just the disabled who benefit from universal design. Universal design is something that takes into account everybody having access to anything regardless of ability, which means that if you, say your hands are full, like mine are, and you want to get into the house. You have a toddler and you've got some groceries, or you've got your briefcase, or you've got the dog, and everything's pulling you in different directions. If you've got a knob on a door, how are you going to get in? No, a knob, that's the movement, right? If you have a handle, you can do this, or my favorite, that one. That's what, the other thing is things that are standards in houses. Kitchen heights are standard heights. They are the standard height that a 6-foot-tall, able-bodied man can function at. Not because they're the cooks, but because they build them. So, and I don't have it out for men. Honestly, I work with men all the time. It's just that there are things that have happened, and happenstance has made it so that there are a bunch of things in houses that relate to the people who build them. And traditionally that has been men. And the people who use the functions in the houses traditionally have been women, who are different body sizes and have different abilities in terms of what they can lift with their, their shoulders. And there's all sorts of different things that, there are differences. So, yeah, thank you, Bill.
What are the chances of older apartments working towards net zero?
So the question was, okay.
What are the chances of older apartment buildings working toward net zero and also working toward co-housing?
Whoa, that's about an hour's worth of question. There are some fantastic examples of older apartment buildings being renovated, and to near net zero ready or net zero, anywhere you can get below 70% of existing space conditioning use is good in my books. I don't, people will get sticky about labels and numbers and stuff. But the best thing you can do for an old building is to reskin it. And there's this fantastic thing out of the Netherlands called Energy Sprong, where they have actually created a manufactured outside panel that basically goes right onto the top. You don't take anything off the building. You put this on top. Basically, you're encapsulating the building in a new, highly efficient envelope. And within that envelope is not just insulation, excuse me, but also a ventilation system. So your indoor air quality is improved, and all the rough-ins for a heat pump. So those kind of things are at a much bigger level than just single-family houses. And I forgot the other part of the question. Oh, co-housing. It depends on the ownership model. If you can buy a building, you can make it into a co-housing project. But if somebody else owns it, right, so it's a rental building, then you have a whole bunch of hurdles because they may or may not want to give up their ownership and the income from that property. So I think that if, the opportunity to find, and this is what several of the co-housing communities have done in Europe and also in the States, is they have actually bought old industrial buildings and repurposed them into into apartments. But I don't see why you couldn't do that if you could get ownership of the actual building. I don't know why you couldn't do the same.
And Sean is leading a quilting class right after this. So bring the pieces of your house and